folks, thanks for joining me for this episode from the EmbellishPod. If you got here by chance, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Hopefully, I can be found on any podcasting platform that exists. And if you can't find me on a platform, send me an email at embellishpod@gmail.com, and I'll try to get that taken care of. You can also find video versions of this podcast on YouTube. You can find all of my links on Instagram at EmbellishPod or TikTok with the same handle. I have a website. It is www.embellishpod.com. It's also a place to pick up these links, episode details, and more. Today I'll have Jacob and Clayton joining me from Hemingway Whiskey, also from West Kentucky Distilling. Had an opportunity to meet with both of them in Owensboro, Kentucky during the Barbecue and Barrels event. There's probably going to be some conversation about that, but also some conversation about these two brands and these two gentlemen who've been a part of distilling or the distilling space. You know, they're eighth generation. So I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation.
Working with Dad. Took me a little bit longer to get back in the industry, but ever since Hemingway Whiskey has come along, I do the blending and help Dad with the finishing that we do for the whiskey. Also kind of a family ambassador, telling our story, our history. Just, having a good time. Like you said, Owensboro was a fun time, John. Good stuff.
So I'm Jacob Call, 8th generation master distiller, 8th generation Kentuckian. I've been in the business coming up on 20 years now. Worked with my father at Florida Distillers. Prior to that, my grandfather worked at Jim Beam. My dad worked at Jim Beam. Our eighth was a guy named Samuel Call, who came to Bourbon County, Kentucky in 1791, who had a couple stills and a dozen fermenters. Fast forward to more modern times. I am a Murray State alum. Go Racers! And I moved back to Kentucky from Florida in 2014, and I knew the guy who had bought the old Medley distillery down in Owensboro, and was employee one there and helped bring the Green River distillery back to life. And then later on, we were sold to Pritzker Capital / Bardstown Bourbon, and they wanted me to stay on. Had a good relationship with Mark Irwin, and decided that I would go my own way with my business partner JD Edwards, and we built the Western Kentucky Distilling Company about 30 miles outside of Owensboro and Beaver Dam, and we've been hitting it hard. Coming up on our 1-year anniversary here in July. And also involved with the Hemingway Rye Whiskey project. So got a lot going on right now.
Yeah, and I could be reading between the lines a little bit here, Jacob, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. But as I think about, you helped rebuild, Ozzie Tyler into what Green River is now, and kind of lay the foundation for that, which probably feels an awful lot like a startup company where you're sort of starting from scratch, right? Because you're picking up something that is old, but also sort of forgotten, and rebuilding it. And then, as acquisitions happen, those are maybe, markers of success. A big company says, hey, we think that what you've done is really valuable and we want to take it to the next level. As you transition, say, you know what, I think I want to open up with West Kentucky Distilling. Were you still just kind of in that, like, I want to build things, from scratch, or did you just want to kind of work for yourself, or, what was the ethos behind leaving what could be some pretty good security, right? Because, you got some significant backing, right? And instead you said, I want to take a significant financial risk and start my own thing.
Well, I've kind of been an entrepreneur really my whole life at heart. You got to remember back in 2014, 2015, the bourbon boom was just kind of taking off. Every distillery was expanding. Pretty much every major distillery looked at the old Medley / Green River distillery It had been vacant for 25 years, piles of rubble everywhere. And I guess I was the only one that was crazy enough to move my family to Owensboro to rebuild it. So we had a great team, great contractors, just a great team that helped to do that. But yeah, I hired every employee there. Wore both hats as the general manager and the master distiller. And it was just a once in a lifetime opportunity to get to do something like that. But yeah, and we brought that brand back, which was really nice. Made some great whiskey. But I always wanted to really own my own distillery and do my own thing, and it was just felt like the right time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess maybe it's got to feel a little bit easier to walking into Ozzie Tyler, Old Medley, Green River, whatever, and having to deal with piles of rubble. Whereas with West Kentucky Distilling, you start with at least a blank slate, right? You didn't have to clean up the remnants from before. So as we kind of, we'll probably weave back and forth between the two brands that exist here. So how does Hemingway Rye play into this story as well, right? Because it's a separate but related entity. Is this correct?
Yeah, it's a separate, completely separate. Hemingway is part of the Groth family, Steve Groth, and the Hemingway family. And it's a sister company to Pilar Rum, which is based in Florida. And then, my father, Ron, is the master distiller there for Pilar and Hemingway and master blender. And, we've always kind of wanted to do something together, my brother and my dad and I. And Steve Groth presented the opportunity to get to do that with Hemingway. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just kind of a separate thing that I do. I will say that we do make all of the new make distillate for Hemingway is made at my distillery here in Western Kentucky. And then the liquid, a portion of the liquid in the Hemingway blend is rye whiskey that I made while at Green River.
Okay. Hey, you already took care of a question that I was going to ask, right? Because I saw that there was some blending that went into play. So how does, how does Hemingway Rye become a product? Was this a product before you guys were a part of it, or did y'all develop this together?
We developed it together. Again, Steve, I guess once he decided he wanted to do a whiskey and brought, three of us together. He basically sent things to Dad. It was kind of a trial and error. It's like, what do we think would be good? So Dad obviously had the sherry cask from the sherry finish rum. So it was, we're gonna finish some whiskey in the sherry cask, see what it does, see how it is. And I think we all agreed it was pretty damn good. So that's kind of how we came up with. Obviously, we knew it was going to be a Hemingway. We knew we pretty much were sold. We were going to do a rye. So that's when we started. This collector box here was from the end of 2022. Mm-hmm. So this is our first collector edition. You open it up and the bottle comes inside here. We're all signed now, 172 bottles, all hand signed by Jacob, Dad, and myself, which I don't know, his hand probably still hurts from doing that, but
some Sharpies, that's for sure.
Yeah. So that was 972 bottles, sold out within 4 days online. So we decided to do a first edition 2,000 cases. We did Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee only. That was around the spring, early summer of last year. And they're completely sold out now, the first edition. So signature is what we have here. Jacob has it there. I'm sure you have a bottle or two. Mm-hmm. So this is
actually, I had a bottle and it is all gone now, and I haven't replaced it yet. I picked one up while I was in Owensboro, and then I burned through it too fast. Right, the first time I got to taste you guys was at the Bourbon Festival last year, and immediately knew that was going to be a staple there. But sorry, go on. I interrupted a little bit.
Oh, you're fine. And this is our everyday staple product, our
Mhm.
signature edition. So 90% of this is 6 year, and then 10% 4 year Jacob's rye that he made at Green River.
Mhm. Yeah, and I guess it begs the question. I assume, and I may be wrong here. Is there an interest or an expectation over time for that to be 100% your distillate, or do you say, I intend to continue blending because there's something magical that can happen sometimes when you bring in two completely different distillates and make one blend out of it?
No, I think it's our intention to all of the rye whiskey will come from the Western Kentucky Distilling Company that we make.
Mhm.
What's really interesting about Hemingway, and I think what makes it special, is it's finished in a rum seasoned Oloroso sherry barrel. So, with Pilar rum, they do a lot of different finishes and different types of barrels. They got a rye finished and a sherry finished, and it really worked out. Uh, it made the whiskey very complex because you'll get notes of rye and you'll get notes of sherry, and it's sweet and it's spicy, and so I think that will always continue to finish it in that um, rum seasoned sherry barrel, but the distillate itself will come from Western Kentucky.
Yeah, and maybe you can explain, rum seasoned. What does that mean? A rum seasoned sherry barrel.
Go
Yeah.
ahead,
So
Clint. You're the sales guy.
yeah, so in Lakeland, that is where the in Florida, where the blending and bottling facility is. Obviously,
Mhm.
Pilar has their own distillery and social club and all the fun stuff in Key West. But
Mhm.
like we say, you couldn't never own enough land in Key West to do
Mhm.
you know blending and doing all the stuff down there. So um, so what's cool about it is that he can control his own source of barrels the
Mhm.
way the operation's running now. So he brings in sherry cask. I know I just helped him unload I think 110 the other day
Mhm.
from Spain. They're just thrown in the back of a trailer, and it's a lot of fun work. So, uh, but yeah, so to answer your question, Pilar rum, we have four rums. There's a blonde, a dark, a sherry finished, and now a rye finished. So he, I guess probably it's been about 4 years or so now that the sherry finish has been out. Very popular. It's just
Mhm.
his dark rum, which is a blend of 9 different rums. The oldest being a 24 year, and it's just finished in that sherry cask and has become one of the flagship, Pilar staple brands. And so to answer your question, the rum was in the sherry cask,
Mhm.
and so now when the rum comes out of that cask, the whiskey goes into that cask, and now we have when the whiskey comes out of the barrel, now we're putting the dark rum in the whiskey barrel, and we have a rye finished rum. So that's what's cool. We can kind of control our own sources and do some experimenting um, and go from there. But
Yeah, and so I mean, effectively, I think what you're at that point is sort of like a double cask finish, right? Because you've had two different spirits in there, and at least when I go to Kentucky Bourbon Festival, and people probably look at me like that guy's kind of a rude asshole. I'll wait in line, I get a drink, and I don't talk to the booth people, right? Because then they'll tell me the story of it. Because I want to know before you say anything about it, what does this taste like to me? And so I snuck in and grabbed a little bit of the Hemingway while you guys were mobbed, right? So I get one and I kind of go over. There was a little seating area right next to where your tent was, and I sat down and I knew it was supposed to be a rye, knew nothing else about it. Went in as blind as I possibly could, and I immediately knew there was something more to it than just being what people expect a rye to be. And as I kind of went back and talked to the folks at the booth and understood what it was, um, sometimes these casks you just know that they're there, right? It's sort of like the difference between three people singing together and three people singing in harmony together, right? Like three
Yeah.
people singing together sometimes sounds great, sometimes sounds terrible. I mean, you guys have been to church, you've heard when we got one off key person that's kind of in the middle, but they're in the group. This particular rye allows all three of those things, the rye, the rum, and the sherry, to sort of play as a part of what is a really well finished profile, or at least for my tastes. And I'm not trying to add a little extra fluff into it, but it was enough that I was like, okay, this is something that people have to come back to on a regular basis. When you think about finishing in the rum seasoned sherry casks, do you have sort of a timeline, or is this explicitly based off of taste? I mean, minimum this amount of time, or when it tastes right, it tastes right.
It's finished to taste is what we like to say. I mean, you're in Florida. Who knows how the weather is going to be affecting things? So I'd say after about a month, it's a weekly taste until we think it's right. Obviously, you can't go backwards. So you don't want.
Right.
I've had things where sherry's just too much in my opinion. So we just want to find that balance of the, like Jacob was saying, the sweetness on the front of the sherry, but you still get the rye sensation and being a 95.5 rye, it's a high rye, so it's gonna be the spices there and all the stuff you're looking for in a good rye. And we like to call it a Christmas in a bottle. That's kind of when I'm tasting people on it. That's how I explain it, because I'm the worst person to ask about all these different notes that you pick up on.
Well, and most of the times, tasting notes, at least from whiskey nerds like me and my peers, are really just a chance for us to really tell people all the different words that we know, right? Most of the time they don't make sense. Christmas in a bottle makes far more sense to everyone out there than, me saying, this tastes like my grandmother's apple pie recipe whenever I was a kid and it was 100 degrees outside and, we had her sun tea, right? No one ever had that experience. No one knows what that tastes like. Christmas is an easy connection, and I think it's a correct connection. It, a lot of times I'll use, it tastes like a cocktail in a bottle, right? And that is not an insult, right? That's like there's a lot of complex work that goes into a lot of cocktails to make them taste really, really good. It's sort of the case with this as well. How thinking that we're going to center a rye that's going to be based out of Florida, how do you get there? Like, how does that happen, right? Because nobody's like, yeah, Florida, whiskey, rye, bourbon, whatever, right? Rum makes sense, maybe even tequila might make sense because you're in a tropical climate. How does rye come into play here? And then how does the Hemingway name play in on this?
Well, I guess the best way to describe why we did it in Florida is that's where most of our staff is. We got a bottling plant in Florida. The whiskey is a blend of MGP out of Indiana and Kentucky, and then it's just happens to be finished there. So it is distilled in Kentucky and Indiana. One thing that we are planning on doing, and we actually just harvested some rye. We at my distillery here, we have 81 acres. We have some great relationships with some local farmers, and we planted our first rye crop, and it was recently harvested. So we've got a variety that was done by the University of Kentucky. Rye notoriously will blow down with all the storms and stuff we get, so they created a variety that stands up a little bit better. It doesn't get as tall, and we harvested that recently, and that will be distilled here on site. So a true estate to bottle product that we're working towards with Hemingway.
Now, my assumption, I can be off base here, obtaining rye grown in the state of Kentucky, pretty tough to do. It's not a huge crop in the state of Kentucky. A lot of times it ends up being a cover crop, a handful of other things. Farmers don't necessarily harvest it for the rye in and of itself. They want the benefits that their crop cycles will allow them to do. To be all Kentucky rye, or is this just going to continue in kind of a very much an estate fashion?
I think probably starting out, it may be more limited type releases, but I think the overall goal will eventually be to get it all, estate grown.
So the intent is to keep that very much an estate. Makes a ton of sense. Trying to get that much rye out of the state of Kentucky it can be tough, right? Um, so you're distilling the rye in Western Kentucky now, and then the bottling is happening in Florida. The blending and bottling happens in Florida, as well as some additional aging for the rum season casks. Um, is there an intent to eventually bring bottling into Kentucky so it's all in one house, or do you want to keep that separate and then maybe building off that? Does West Kentucky Distilling send their bottles to Florida to be bought, or their whiskey to Florida to be bottled, or is it happening on site?
As far as Western Kentucky goes, we do bottle here on site, just very limited single barrel type stuff, small
Mhm.
batch. Uh, don't really know yet on the future of where Hemingway will be bottled. I could certainly see that down the road. We have made a lot of barrels of rye whiskey, thousands of barrels of rye whiskey for Hemingway that's being stored in Kentucky. So I would say probably pretty likely down the road it would be
Mhm.
bottled here.
Yeah, moving liquid across a handful of states on a 14-hour drive, it's got to be pretty difficult, I would imagine, especially at that volume. As you think about maybe the development of either one of those brands, you're distilling some bourbon in Western Kentucky. You're also doing some rye specifically for the Hemingway Rye brand. Do you ever see either one of those brands like pursuing a Boo Rye? Or some rye finished in ex bourbon casks, any of those things come into play for either one of the brands?
Yeah, I think as far as Hemingway goes, I think we're very creative. Um, I think as far as Hemingway goes, we're always kind of pushing the envelope a little bit. Um, Different releases, different experiments. I mean, my dad's got all kinds of little things going on down there. As far as Western Kentucky goes, with our future brands, I would say that we are all about tradition, all about authenticity, all about Kentucky, whether it be estate grown corn or rye, heritage. We will unabashedly stick to that. I would not expect us anytime soon to push the boundaries. You can probably tell from what I've made previously at the other distillery that uh, I want to be known as the distiller that makes good, solid Kentucky bourbon and rye
Mhm.
whiskey.
Okay. And maybe that, I guess that can transition to some questions about West Kentucky Distilling. Right now, the only couple of things that have come out underneath that brand have been some single barrels, and from what I understand, I think those are single barrels that were whiskey that came with you as you approached the brand. What does the future of West Kentucky Distilling look like? Is it primarily a custom distillation or contract distillation for other brands? Is it a house brand? Like, what does the future of it look like?
Yeah, so currently we are doing a lot of contract distillation, custom distillation. We're technically the second largest 100% Kentucky owned distillery. We make about 55,000 barrels a year. Heaven Hill's number one, and there's a big gap between us and Heaven Hill, but
Right.
pretty much everybody else is owned by other groups or whatever. Um, but yeah, I can tell you that we do have big plans in the future for our own brands that would not be under a Western Kentucky name. So it would
Mhm.
be we've been able to scoop up a pretty cool old trademark. Um, can't talk about it yet, but stay tuned. I think it's going to make some waves.
Well, that sounds certainly interesting, and I'll say, you've been distilling for a long time. You've proven that you have the ability to make high quality product that's going to be sought after by a lot of people. If I think about, your former days at your prior employer, they're, 75% contract distillation, which means a whole lot of people are coming after that, right? They want those things. A lot of brands are building their reputation off of that. And that's sort of the wheels that you both built and set in motion. So, the idea of West Kentucky Distilling kind of becoming larger than that makes complete and utter sense. But as you kind of set it up, how do you pick Beaver Dam of all places, right? You could have moved closer to the heart of bourbon country, right? There's not a ton of things happening on the western end of the state. There's a handful of craft distilleries, and then you have Heritage with Green River now, which was a rebuild. What says Beaver Dam's the answer, right? Where there's no other whiskey right now.
Really for us, number one, I live in Owensboro, so it's close. It's 30 minutes away. Number two, there was a big site here. There's like a 1,200 acre industrial park. So we have 80 acres, 81 acres. We just bought another 10 for a future visitor center event space down the road. And I guess it was combination of they had all of the utilities in place. They had the natural gas, the sewer, the water. So it was almost a ready-made site. It's surrounded by fields of farmland. We're really close with the farmers. It's not in an urban type setting. It just made a lot of sense. We're right off two major interstates, Western Day Parkway and 165. It's an hour from my lake house at Lake Barkley. So made a lot of sense for me.
Yeah, and the specific location you're talking about, I think they've had that billboard on the side of the interstate for the last 20 years about that location and the architecture or the infrastructure that exists there. I say that as a West Kentucky kid who spent some time traveling to Louisville or Lexington or Owensboro for that matter. Had family living there. You pass by it every time and you're like, oh, something eventually is going to go there, and it sounds like something's going to go there. And it is a main thoroughfare, great location. Us in the western end of the state appreciate it, especially with the idea of having some opportunity to visit in the future. Future is very long, right? That's the planning function of it all, because you got to do it sustainably. If you had to kind of look into a crystal ball, what does the next 5, and you guys have to, right, because you're doing liquid planning, what does the next 5 to 10 years look like for growth for either brand, right? So Clayton, you can talk about Hemingway, or Jacob, you could talk about Hemingway or West Kentucky for that matter.
Go ahead. Well, you can hit Hemingway first.
Yeah, with Hemingway, I know we hit on some of the points, earlier. All the distillant's going to be coming from Jacob at Western Kentucky, so that'll be coming down the line. Again, we're kind of testing the waters. Innovation's big, so could see for sure cash strength's going to be coming. That'll be our next release. So you'll have basically the signature edition, but at cash strength. A bourbon, definitely possible. Could be a high rye bourbon, or it could be a possibly finished bourbon. So that could be coming down the line. So it's hard to, like you said, a crystal ball, but there is there's definitely going to be some innovation. I know the 972 bottle in the library book here that I was showing, that was collector first edition. So if second edition comes out, that could be the next possibility of another 972 bottle release. I think from what I hear, we've started some type of a cult. I'm not sure, but we got a lot of people calling themselves the 972 Club because they got one of the first 972 bottles. So that theme could continue, where we do a special release, kind of online only, 972 bottle type of release. So there's definitely cool stuff to come down the road for sure.
Yeah, and before we hop over to West, I'm gonna cut in just a second. So if you wanted to know about those types of things, do you guys have like an email list? Do you have a place to go and sign up so you can get notified about that, or do you just need to load the web page every day to see the news that are coming up?
I mean, I would start by going to the webpage, and as soon
Mhm.
as you go on, you're asked if you want to join, the
Mhm.
Hemingway social club for the whiskey, and then you'll get, emails and things through Instagram, Facebook. So yeah, once you join the club, then you'll get all the info that you need.
Gotcha.
What's
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, as far as Western Kentucky distilling goes, we started distilling about a year ago, and so we've got that. We're running better than I could have even imagined. We're 24/7 operation. All of that is going great. We just bought a bottling line a few weeks ago. Um, Really, for us, the next phase will be building out some brands, as well as a visitor experience. Fortunately for us, myself and JD, we've got a few barrels that we had made at Green River, but also Green River being a contract distiller, there are tons of barrels that I made
Mhm.
floating around. So it makes it pretty easy to scoop up some of that production and fold it into a brand that's whiskey that I've made. So that helps a lot. So we got a few things on the back burner. We got a pretty cool Hemingway has a pretty cool project coming out at the Bourbon Festival this year. So I think hopefully people will line up for that one once it gets announced. Yeah, a lot of cool things in the works.
Yeah, and that's a good touch point. You guys will be there with the Hemingway brand for Kentucky Bourbon Festival. I think there's still a small quantity of tickets that are available. But I've done a couple episodes in preparation for 2024, and I've got one final one that I'll do later on. But I think now I'm starting to catch people that are like, okay, now I have my ticket. What am I planning for? Right? Because you have so many distilleries and so many brands on site, you can only drink so many before your taste buds are blown, right? Before you got to move over to the cocktails or the slushies, or go back to the hotel and drink some water, whichever one of those things you have to do. It's good to know what brands are planning what, so that way you can plan your pours accordingly. And you want to do it early. I know last year at the event, Hemingway sold through the bottles that they had on site, right? So that's one of the things that Bourbon Festival has added in the last few years, is the ability to buy bottles in the tent. And you're alluding to the special release that'll come out for Kentucky Bourbon Festival, and we'll learn more about what that is. um, do you intend to just kind of make them all of it? Because I've seen brands they're all available right now, and when they sell through, they sell through. We're going to bring out so many for Friday and so many for Saturday, and kind of stage out what it is. Or do you guys just say, it is what it is, buy them as quick as you can?
I don't know the answer to that yet. Our marketing group is probably all over that. I don't know. Clay might know better than me.
No, I mean, last year obviously was our first year, so
Mhm.
definitely learned a lot. Learned we didn't have enough bottles to make it through all 3 days. So, um,
Well, and that's a good thing, right? Not having to go home with extra bottles is a positive, and I don't see too many brands that are having to pack up empty or full boxes of bottles. And a lot of times they're just breaking down their cardboard boxes and they're done for the week. So it's a good sign, that's where you want to be. But it does bring forward the concern for people who are like, well, I wasn't there Friday, I was only there Saturday, and I didn't get a chance. So uh, maybe a
I
key
will
is show
tell
up on Friday.
you. I will tell you. The product will be a collector type thing,
Mhm.
never to be released again. So
All right. Let's go ahead and make the note that we need to bring the money and be prepared, right? Like we're all ready to spend our money, right? That's what we're showing up for. And I assume I know, because we talked about this offsite, but offline. But both of y'all will be around Kentucky Bourbon Festival week.
yep,
yep,
be there.
yep, and Dad, like we were saying earlier, celebrating his 50th year of distilling. So You'll have all three of us. Three
Yeah,
students.
and that's a huge milestone. 50 years of distilling is not. I don't know that it'll be as common 10 years from now as it is now, right? We have a lot of tenured distillers that have been in doing this for a while, but 50 years is a long time to do anything, right? I don't know that I want to do my job for 50 years.
Yeah, he's not here, so I can brag on him a little bit. He was at Jim Beam for 16 years, and he calls himself more of the blue collar distiller that did the work. So he was part of the team that created Jim Beam Black Label. We did Jim Beam and Cola in a Can, but he also did cool stuff like Mr. and Miss T Bloody Mary mix, and he did all the Cruzan rum flavors. He created all of the Cruzan rum flavors. So he's like a Swiss Army knife. He's got his background in quality, and he's an American original. That's what I call him.
Yeah, and he took the helm of master distiller or distiller at a time when that was the job as opposed to the figurehead that shows up at all the events, right? So now, and you're probably having to experience this as some Jacob as you walk through these things. You're probably pulled more away from distilling and more towards the marketing side of things because that's what the normal consumer now expects you to be at all the things, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to give him a little media training, but it's not going very good.
Honestly, that makes for some of the best stuff, though, right? You get real responses. Now, it may be it might be a nightmare for the marketing team. They may be the ones that are like, listen, you can't tell everything that you know. Hopefully, people are responsible for that. So, the Hemingway branding, I think, is some of the best in the market, right? The bottle design, the way it's all put together, the little subtle cues and touches that point to the Hemingway name. Who has the fascination with Hemingway? How did that get identified? Like, this is, you're going to build a brand, you're going to build a brand, and how do we attach to Hemingway?
I think it started really with Pilar, with the rum. The Hemingway family actually came to Steve, our owner, and wanted to start a brand with the Hemingway, the Ernest Hemingway name, just to carry on that legacy, and kind of just blew up from there. I mean, Papa's Pilar. Papa, if he liked you, he'd say, just, call me Papa. Pilar, the name of his boat, nickname of his second wife. So, so that's what's cool about it, especially with the Hemingway, the whiskey, is you got three families all working together. Steve and his two sons, Kyle and Paul, and then you got my dad and me and my brother working along with the Hemingways. They sign off on everything with the bottle. They with I know with Pilar, and we're going to be doing it with the whiskey as well, but they have a foundation, so every bottle of Pilar rum that's sold goes to that foundation. They give back millions to literacy, reef restoration programs, cleaning the ocean. That's kind of, like you say, the Florida Pilar on the water type of a thing. So with the whiskey, we're going to be doing something like that as well. It could be, something along the lines of, the environment with trees and protection, stuff like that. So, but yeah, so like you said, the bottle, the innovation, the replica typewriter keys on the front here, all put on by hand, by the way. I don't think we've misspelled any yet, but you never know. You might find one out there somewhere. This bottle, actually, Hemingway's face comes through the background of the back label as you drink the bottle down. And then the the necker here is a replica of a grain receipt, like a rye grain receipt that you would get. And you can open that up and find information on how he wrote 6-word stories. So we have our own 6-word challenge that you can participate in and write your own little stories. Just the innovation that went into it, like you said, I mean, not in my wildest dreams could I came up with a bottle like that. But
Right.
John, we talked about we've mentioned Steve Groff a few times. So Steve was an original founder of Angel's Envy. So some of that, I mean, they had probably one of the coolest bottles back then when it launched. So you can kind of see some of those cues Steve's very good at marketing. It's kind of like, everybody and their brother used to claim that they were a founder of Grey Goose, or, they created Grey Goose vodka, but, Steve actually was one of the founders of Angel's Envy. Um, so, that marketing background certainly helps us a lot.
Yeah. And you can tell it with Angel's Envy, and if you really, it's beautiful, but it's also smart marketing, because when Angel's Envy hit the market, a lot of everybody had pretty standard, straight, maybe moderately narrow bottles, and you give it a little bit more shoulders, you get a little more shelf space on it, right? And so then with Hemingway, you get a little more shoulder on it, and you get a little more shelf space. So when your eye is running down a shelf, it's straight up, straight up, straight up, and then there's this block that lives there, right? And it does catch the eye, and it's a beautiful bottle to match that. So whoever designed it deserves a ton of credit. And you were talking a little bit about legacy, and what I notice, and this is maybe a newish trend. As I dig through the Hemingway information, dig through West Kentucky information, you guys don't shy away from the fact that you're eighth generation distillers, right? But you're not building a story off of the first generation of distilling, right? You're building it off of what you guys are doing right now. Was that a conscious decision? Because there are a lot of brands that do that. They'll create a backstory. Sometimes it's a little bit embellished. Sometimes it's a whole lot embellished. Were you just conscientious of that, or is it just this is how you guys developed the brand?
We talked about it a little bit. The brand was, I think, was conceived maybe before we got into that a whole lot. I tell you, I always knew I was seventh generation, but the way that I figured this out, the whole eighth generation thing, was during COVID. I got bored, and I started doing all this genealogy research, and I hit a wall, and I hired a lady to help me put the pieces together. And she happened to be a retired tour guide from Woodford. So she was kind of into bourbon anyway. So I told her, I said, hey, when you're doing all this, if you can find anything at all about whiskey, that would just be amazing. So she called me up and she said, you're not going to believe this. So I found, so Samuel Call had like 10 kids. And of course, when you have that many kids, they all fight all the time. Nobody can get along probably. So there was a lawsuit when he passed away, and she found his estate through the lawsuit. And he had a 75-gallon still, 120-gallon still, a dozen fermenters. So definitely not a hobby.
Right.
There were a couple depositions. He was actually in a lawsuit with Elijah Craig over a land dispute. So we got a couple depositions from that. So, stay tuned. There may be some stuff later on about all that, but yeah.
That's cool, and my wife will thoroughly appreciate that, because she's the genealogy person, right? She got bored during COVID too, and she started doing genealogy research, and so anytime we go by a cemetery, she was like, "Oh, I'm going to look and see who's buried here," right? Because she's got about 57 apps that are for that. So it's always good. What I like is that you're telling the story instead of letting a marketer tell the story, right? Instead of a neck tag right now. Now that may come in the future, but you have substantiation, which is always positive, right? As opposed to, I found this recipe behind a milk jug in my grandfather's cabinet, right? Which can be fun, right? For the average consumer, they read it, that's cool. It may not stick in their brain. It may stick in their brain. They move on. But then there's like the whiskey nerds like me that obsess over the details. And I want to find out more of, how much of this is true or untrue. So there's a ton of legacy in this. Now, you guys are eighth generation. Is there going to be a ninth generation? Do we have succession that's happening, or are you guys it?
No, yeah. My daughter is about to turn 17. My son's 15. So Clay's got a couple kids. So, I don't know. I will tell them what my dad told me. you need to go get a real job first. And then after you've experienced life, then come back and we'll talk. So I was, I had all of the really challenging jobs when I was in high school and college. Worked on the bottling line, worked in processing, cleaning tanks. Fed the bottling line glass and stacked cases. And we had a cattle ranch. Used to take care of the cows down there. So we've, but I was a banker. I don't like to tell that to too many people. I was a COO for Republic Bank out of Louisville for about 7 years, and got a lot of good experience, exposed to a lot of different people and businesses. And so, yeah, I'll tell my kids, go get a real job first, and then you can go play in whiskey.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback off Jacob. Like, again, I was 4 years behind him, so I went through the same experiences with him, making sure dad made sure to give us the shitty jobs first, at the distillery. So at Florida Distillers, when we worked there, or summer jobs, going through school, again, taking care of the cattle ranch that we had. And so, yeah, he definitely, I remember specifically myself, this is kind of a cutthroat business. Go, find your own path and do your own thing. So that's kind of what I did. I had my own business for 13 years and then went into a manager role with another company. But it was always around the industry, obviously. I think I'm probably the most important of it because I had to taste it all to make sure I gave them my approval on what they were making and doing. So, got to take some credit for that. Right. And then, but now to be fully involved in this project, Hemingway Rye, and, learning from Dad and Jacob and, what I've picked up in my own experiences and business worlds, and kind of being one of those bourbon geeks for a while, and having friends that, we get together and try different things. And now, now this full circle, and, obviously thank Steve for, allowing me to come in on this process as well. And so it's been fun. No major fights yet between, me or my brother or Dad. So everybody's getting along, it seems.
That can always be the risk in working with family. And, I've made a few notes along the way, and I noted that Jacob made it a point to say that he's still in Kentucky, right? And maybe that you're not. And you've made it a point to say that you're 4 years younger, at least 3 or 4 different times, right? Letting everyone know I'm obviously the younger of the two. Feels like there's some healthy sibling rivalry that exists there. We got a master distiller here, but you're the most important because of the tasting. I love this. This is fantastic. I have a brother as well, right? This exists in everybody's family. As I think about, parallels, right? I've drawn parallels with farming and distilling for a long time, and I see this as a common conversation that happens on farms as well, right? So if you think about generational farming, every parent in farming is like, go do something else first, right? Whether it's because it's difficult or because you need to learn other things, or because working in a distillery at that level, you end up being the kind of person that has to solve about 10 or 12 different problems, whether it be budgetary, whether it be recipe, whether it be plumbing, whether it be, where are we getting our glass from, procurement, all of those things. It's similar to farming, right? Exact same thing. You got to be a meteorologist. You got to be a workflow expert. You got to be a chemical expert. You got to be all these different things all at one time. So great advice to go do something else first. And it also lets you make sure that, if you come back to it, you really, really want to do it, because it's not a 9-to-5 job. You don't punch out at the end of the day. You guys are doing really, really great things. I want to give you an opportunity, right as we kind of push up on the end of the time that we have available. If you've got anything else you want to share or talk about, absolutely, here's your chance. I will punch in Kentucky Bourbon Festival. Both of you guys will be there. Hemingway will be there. There's a special release that's involved with it. Go to the website. Make sure you're signed up to be a part of the club, so that way when the next special edition comes out, that 972 bottles, and that you can be part of the 972 club. Now that means that maybe somebody else gets out of the club because you got in before them, but that's up to you guys to sort out. So I'll give you guys a chance. If you got anything else you want to add in, kick on.
I'll just say thanks, John. This was it's fun talking with you, and glad I got to meet you up in Owensboro. As far as the brand, I mean, again, this bottle here is the staple. I mean, this is what you're going to find on the shelf, everywhere you go. So you give this time to kind of sink in, everybody find out what we're about. That's what I would say about this brand. And then yeah, sign up for the newsletter, and there will be special things to come. So,
from a Western Kentucky distilling standpoint, I would say stay tuned. We've got some really cool projects in the works, and it's my goal to continue to bring bourbon back to Western Kentucky and continue to make not only Western Kentucky proud, but all of Kentucky proud.
Yeah, and I like to touch into Western Kentucky because a lot of our distilling friends think that Kentucky ends somewhere between Owensboro and Bowling Green. Like that's the end of the state, and there's like another 3.5 hours of driving out here. So us on the true west end of the state really, really appreciate that. And you've got a home at Lake Barkley, so you count on this, right? You're in the club. You're a racer alumnus as well. Yeah, you're a racer alumnus. That matters as well. So you understand, because even for us, there's still another hour to the west of us to get to the edge of the state. So thank you guys for hopping on. I always appreciate when people give me any time. Your time is valuable. You can't make more of it. And so look forward to seeing you guys in Bardstown in September, I think it is. And I'll encourage everybody, follow both brands on social media stuff. That also helps you understand, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or whatever, you understand things that might happen between now and then that could pop up along the way. So Clayton, Jacob, thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in for this episode from the EmbellishPod. If you enjoyed this, please leave me a review on whatever platform you're consuming this on. Leave a comment if possible. Hit the thumbs up, hit the like, whatever you need to do. Hit me up on social media on TikTok or Instagram using EmbellishPod and give me a follow so you can keep up with what's going on here. I can be found at www.embellishpod.com with all of my links, accounts, contact details, and more. Thanks for stopping by.